Hello, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Monday Morning Show. I am your host, Coach Molle from Three Pines Leadership, and thank you so much for joining me this morning. Well, Mondays are some of my favorite times of the week because it's when we get our week started. It's when we get going, and if we start our Mondays off right, we can get our weeks going in the right direction. So that's what we're going to do here at the Monday Morning Show. So I have my giant tub of tea ready, and yeah, let's get into this. So I'm going to go over some news articles I have seen this week that I find kind of interesting things to talk about. So I'll be doing a lot of talking, but if you'd like to join me, you can find me on in the chat. I've got the chat pulled up so we can get cozy, we can get comfy, you can get ready with your day. Or if you're on the other side of the world, you can start winding down your day. So let's jump into it. There's been a lot of news around the world. Obviously, we're going to hear and talk a lot about the protests and demonstrations that have been happening around the world. We're going to talk a bit about Jeffrey Epstein today. We'll talk about schools and businesses reopening, and we'll get into some politics. I like talking about politics, you know me. So, but I really want to start with this story. This has been floating around on the YouTube. It's probably been filling my recommended page. Probably, it feels like everyone who's interested in the story has made a comment about the story, but now it's my turn. So we've heard about the family blogger Micah Stauffer and her husband James Stauffer. They're in a series of YouTube channels from their car garage to their family has their own blog channel, and then the mom has her own channel as well. And of course, all of these platforms are monetized. So no matter what the content is, they're able to make a lot of good money off of them. They have a fair number of subscribers, just shy of 1 million, but that has been drastically going down. They closed down their family blog channel, and the mom's channel has been losing followers substantially. The dad's channel, not so much. And why? Why is this happening? Why are they in the news? Why do I know their name? Why have I been watching family YouTubers? I don't know. It's quarantine. Come on, give me a break. But they are in the news because they have been going on a journey for the last couple years to build their family. So Micah, the mom, has a daughter from a previous relationship. When she and her current husband got married, they then had 2 more biological kids, and then they decided to go on a journey to adopt a child, an international child. So we have, not only did they go on this international adoption journey, but they also went and decided to adopt a child with special needs. So to my understanding, international adoption from China is a complicated process, as all international adoption is. One of the stipulations I found was that you can adopt a child if you're a single female, but you need to have a letter from... You need to have a bunch of documentations and letters and signed affidavits and things like this that prove that you are not homosexual. Oh, goodness, a loving home. But yeah, go ahead, send your kids to these loving homes. So this family adopted this child and brought him into their home. So there is a special child adoption process from China where it's pretty difficult right now, from what I understand, to adopt a child from China without any special needs. There is much higher rates of adoption right now in these special child programs, and that could mean a child with a cleft palate that can be fixed with a simple surgery. It could be a child with autism, where we know that's a spectrum, so we don't know, we can't pinpoint exactly what the prognosis and the diagnosis is going to be and how that's going to develop over time. You could also have a child that has severe medical needs and will require medical attention on a regular basis. You just don't know. Also, within the definition of the special child program are children over the age of 2. So if a child has behavioral issues and has been put into the orphanages or the orphanages with quotations around, because we have found that in some international adoption agencies, the children may have 2 or even just 1 living parent, and the orphanage will actually take that child out of custody of their parents, or say that they're providing a better lifestyle or a better life for the child. They're able to support, the orphanage is able to support the child with food and with education and things like that. And then these international adopters, parents, will come in and pick out the children that they want. They'll be then taken away out of the country to their new home countries. And then the biological parents of those children, who are still alive in some of these cases, will have nothing. They'll have no way of getting their children back at that point. Their children at that point will have been stolen from them or coerced out of their possession. So we've seen this in many countries around the world. So this seems to be a nice complex story. So those are a lot of the complexities that we've recognized have been happening in the adoption world for many years. But now we're adding this extra dimension because of the proliferation of these family bloggers. And so from what I've seen in relation to this case with the Stauffer family, is that this couple, the mom and dad, went down this interesting journey where they started becoming more ingrained in their Christian faith, and they became more wrapped into the online community of adoptive Christian families. They really changed the way that they wanted their life to go. So we have this extra dimension of social media and influencer, and then the business on top of that. So they were able to bring in tons and tons of followers, as well as tons and tons of money to bring this child home. So not only did they have sponsors on their videos, not only did they make the AdSense off of their videos, which is fine, that's how the business works, but they were also asking their followers to donate money to help them adopt their child. So that kind of sucks. Good morning, my friend. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. It's been a bit. I love chatting with you guys. So I'm just chatting about the Stauffer family, which is, the adoption gone wrong. So they went over to China, or they went through this process. They got their followers to donate money to help them bring this boy home, and they were very open about bringing home a special needs child. They were very open about how the doctors and medical professionals were giving them information and looking at this child's file and saying, you know what, this is going to be really difficult. This is going to be, it's going to require a lot of it. This child's needs are going to require a lot of attention. You already have multiple children. In this process, they also ended up giving birth to another child. So at this point, once they brought home their adopted child and they had their new baby, they had 5 kids in the house. So if you have a child with special needs, of course you're going to need to give them extra attention. But it seems like what they were doing was they were treating their adoptive child completely differently than the rest of their children. And it seemed like the child became a bit of a burden on them. When he wasn't able to give them AdSense and revenue in that sense, he then became that burden. So we find out this week that the parents have chosen to rehome this child. And that's where all the big stink online has been coming from, because a lot of people are really a lot of people who aren't involved in the adoption world are really upset about the fact she rehomed the child, without understanding that international adoption has a rehoming rate or a failure rate of about 25%. It is a normal part of the process, and the instances of rehoming or failed adoption or failed placements happen because more of those happen the older the child is, because you're taking them away from their culture, away from their home, away from their family, like the family of the people around them that they've come to realize as their family. So there's all of these added complications, and if you don't have the time, energy, and empathy to sit down with that child and to work through those processes and to find a way for it to work, in many cases it doesn't. And when you have special needs children, that's adding extra attention, financial obligations, etc., that unfortunately the adoption process isn't set up to make sure that it's the right fit. Domestic adoptions, you have much more opportunity to have a more level transition, whereas international adoption, as I mentioned before, you're taking them out of their culture, so that can be really difficult. So we've seen that happening. It's been blowing up all of my social media and stuff like that. So I just want to put in that there is, before you jump to judge someone like this, understand that take a moment to understand the different levels of complexity to them. I'm not saying what they did was right, but I recognize that the problem in this situation came a heck of a lot earlier than what a lot of people are blaming them for now. A lot of people are just saying that the thing they did wrong was rehome the child. Instead, I think the problem happened a lot earlier when they started using the child for clout, for money, for followers, etc. That's opened up this really interesting conversation about the rights of children online and the rights of children in reality TV, for example. So I went down this rabbit hole yesterday about some of the TLC's families. Because, we have the large families that have very fundamentalist Christian ideas. And I'm not saying, believe in what you want to believe. Just be careful about the way that you raise your children. And be careful about being physical with your children, and be careful when you bring your children on TV and they start to become part of your business. So in some jurisdictions, it is perfectly legal to employ your children and not pay them, as long as it's part of a family business. So we have this family, they're the Duggars, right, from TLC, and it's come to the news that it's just the parents who get paid from the network. The rest of the kids don't. But they were clearly employed. They were clearly doing things to further the income of the parents. But the father ended up just divvying out gifts and making it seem like, he's such a nice person, and that's a gift from him, as opposed to something that those children earned. So the complication is we have all of these YouTube families, right, who are clearly using their children for followers, for clout, for money. And then we also have the world of reality TV, where in some respects they're also doing the same thing with their children. Another group, a third group, would be child actors. So those are members of the Stage Actors Guild or the Screen Actors Guild. There are laws around how often they can work, what kind of hours they can work, how much schooling has to be provided, etc., etc., etc. But in the worlds of social media and like family blogging, and in the world of reality TV, we don't have those options. Good morning, Alex. How are you? Zombie. I love that name. Love that name. I am a huge zombie fan. Huge zombie fan. One of my taglines is, because that's what I do when I kill zombies. I have been known to say that quite often. So welcome. So yeah, stop using your kids to make money, or at least teach them the business behind it. I have met so many freaking inspirational kids who have business-minded parents yes, the parents have pushed them or guided them towards these paths, but they have taught them the fundamentals of business, and they have allowed them the opportunity to earn their own money, and the parents have then set that aside in like a trust. So if your child is a member of the Screen Actors Guild, you have to put aside their earnings, for example. So I had a couple friends when I was a kid who were in commercials and stuff around here, or in Canadian TV stuff. Right? I grew up in the time of Degrassi. Keep that in mind. So those kids, their parents had to put that money away in a trust, and when the kids turned 18, they were able to access that money. If you don't have those kinds of regulations and stipulations, the parents can take all of that money. And we're seeing tons of these families, I think maybe because so many people are at home in lockdown, in quarantine, and they don't know, or I guess they don't have anything better to do, so they're really diving deep into some of these family channels and realizing that there's some pretty strange behavior. There's another family that has been mentioned a lot recently that use very strict punishments. And not only are they filming the punishments of the children, but they're also, like when they have sensitive talks and embarrassing moments and things like that, those are also being shared. The kids aren't getting it. And even some of these videos, the mom like sits down with her camera and is like, hey, come take a seat next to me, we're gonna have the talk. And the child clearly says, are you filming this? Do you have to film this? They clearly don't want to be part of what their parents are doing, but again, the parents are pushing them into doing that, and they're taking all the money from it. So get your priorities straight, people. I am definitely having a great morning. A great morning. All right, so that's enough about crazy family bloggers. I needed to get that off my head. It's been bugging me. So I have this other article I want to go through that just popped into my feed. Came out on Saturday evening from the news here in Toronto. And the question is, can employers ask staff what they're up to outside of work during the pandemic? So many of us have been laid off from our regular jobs, and we're at home. In the city, there are tons of people who are going and participating in the demonstrations. There are people who are participating in, like, I don't believe there's a virus, let's go hang out in the park kind of attitudes as well. So keep that in mind. So let's read this article. It's from CTV. Came out on the 6th of June. So between the ongoing anti-black racism protests, provinces continuously reopening, and the temptation to gather with friends again as summer looms, do employers, concerned about the workplace safety during a pandemic, have the right to ask their staff what they've been up to on their personal time? Employers have obligations under the occupational health and safety regulations to keep their workplace and employees safe from harm, but the same employees are also guaranteed privacy rights. Ooh, complex situation, my favorite. If someone poses an identifiable threat to infecting others in the workplace, an employer can ask them to stay home. The question is, what is considered an identifiable threat? Prior to the pandemic, the law has generally fallen more on the side of the employee's privacy. Lawyers who spoke with ctvnews.ca said that COVID-19 has shifted those boundaries, leaving legal experts in some disagreement over whether laws around workplace safety supersede those that protect an employee's right to privacy. So what do you guys think? Do you think an employer should have the right to tell us or to ask what we're doing with our free time when we're not at work? And what do you think about employers who have laid off their staff? So the employer is not paying their staff. The government is paying the staff. So do you think that the employer has a right or has any authority to ask what the employee or the former employee is doing in their free time? And yeah, what do you think? In my opinion, a I recognize the complexity on both sides, and I'd like to, of course, add in some more complexity. When you talk about schools, you don't have those same restrictions on students. It's one thing with elementary and secondary school students, but in post-secondary education, education in my country at least is a right. So even if someone is deemed to be sick, the institution has to do whatever they can to make sure that student can get the education that they've paid for, let's be honest. So yeah, let me know. I'm curious. So that's that one. Yeah, lots of people are losing their jobs right now, and it's bad. And yeah, we've seen that the jobs numbers are changing in some countries, but before you start celebrating those job numbers like some people have been, look at those really specifically. Look at, are you increasing numbers in full-time employment or part-time employment? Are you replacing jobs or are you creating new jobs? And then look deeper into the demographics. What jobs are coming back in what sectors, and are they coming back with the appropriate amount of protection? Are they coming back? Just look deeper into that kind of stuff, because what I've been seeing when I've been looking at these numbers is a disproportionate number of people in minority populations are going back to work in part-time or casual jobs, and they're usually frontline, and they usually don't have adequate amounts of PPE. So companies are allowing more telecommuting and working from home, but they're only offering that for, say, their management level staff, whereas their frontline staff are expected to show up to work, and not much has changed. So it's complex in that kind of a way. So going off of that, going back to schools for a moment, I have this great article from The Guardian here that's about primary schools, or so elementary schools, reopening in the UK. So they've been given the green light, I think, on this week or last week they were given the green light to go back to work. And it says here that just about 90% of schools in some districts aren't opening. Even though the government has said it's time to reopen, these schools have chosen not to, because the pupils of the school, so the students and their parents, have chosen not to go back for fear of their safety and stuff like that. So that's kind of interesting to see. I wonder how that's going to play out longer term, when you have like a disparity between certain schools in one district that have gone back to school and have fulfilled certain educational requirements, and then other schools haven't. So are those students able to graduate? Are they getting the right information to further their education at the rate that they should be? And is that going to push resources into different places that maybe they could be better allocated if everyone was doing the same thing? Who knows? Yes. Oh, Alex, you are hitting the nail right on the head. Absolutely. So many companies now are taking on younger workers because it's cheaper. Absolutely. But there's also an added complication, at least here. So I'm in Canada, and the government has given out money to post-secondary students, as part of like government welfare, kind of. We have this cool program called the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, that's able to cover wages. It's like our employment insurance, but it's a standard fee. It's more of it's a broader program that more people can get into, and it has different categories for different types of people, right? If you fit into those categories. So I'm not a youth, so I don't fit into that box, but a lot of my staff are like university age students, and they're being given a check from the government that is equal to or greater than the amount that they would make working in the summer during their summer jobs. So that definitely complicates it, because a lot of young people are choosing not to work, which is fine. Like that's your decision. Yeah, but there is that complication as well. Like, who is going back to work? What jobs are going back to work? Who's getting paid? Who's getting paid what? Were these replacement jobs? Are they brand new jobs? Da 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 da. The other thing I'm curious about is, at least in an organization that I've been working for a while, we've expected that like 50% of our workforce was going to retire within this 5-year gap. And I think we're about in the middle of that. So I'm curious to see for our older generations if this whole lockdown, et cetera, is going to propel some people towards retirement quicker, or if this is going to throw a total wrench in that. I know the markets have been like haywire, and if you weren't watching the markets and you were watching the world fall apart and you didn't jump on those opportunities, maybe your portfolio has lost 30-40%. So maybe that's pushing some people to a crisis point where they've been laid off. They're in their golden or their senior years, so they're not as easily employable or re-employable at a new job. It is, the older you get, the harder it is to learn new skills. So if these people have been laid off, usually we're talking like when you're older, you're making more money than minimum wage. So the money that the government's giving you is not adequate to cover your bills. So you're put into that financial strain. Plus, if you've been relying on investments for your retirement, that's now lost value. So maybe you want to keep your money in hopes that it will raise up, so you don't have access to those funds. You're less liquid, you're more tied in. So the complications just kind of pile on. So I'm really interested to see what's going to come for that demographic as well. And I hope that everyone can get through this at least the same that they went into it. But in my heart, I'd love to see if everyone could get through this bigger, stronger, better than they went in the first place. So that's that. All right, everyone. It's my favorite time of the show. It's time to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Yay! Yay! So I've been watching the Jeffrey Epstein case for, it feels like 10 years. Since before his initial arrest. The circles that I ran in when I was younger overlapped some of what's going on in his case. So his name and the people around him, those names floated around in my circles, which was very interesting to be a young and in some cases underage girl in that time. I was not in Florida. I had nothing to do with that. I was up in Toronto. Don't worry about it. Toronto and France. But it was just, yeah. So I've just been curious, keeping my eye on that. So Netflix, of course, came out with Filthy Rich. It's like a short docu-series about the case, which is actually based off of... Oh, I don't have it with me right now. The book called Filthy Rich, whose author his name is eluding me right now. Anyways, so it's based off of that book, which the book starts at the 2005-2006 arrest, and then talks about the deal that was made with the prosecutors and goes on and on and on. It's a fantastic book. I highly, highly, highly recommend reading it if you're interested in this case. The detail in this book is phenomenal. They literally read out police transcripts. You're reading, but word for word from these people. And so Netflix has added to this docuseries. I was expecting just a visual representation of what you read in the book, but they went above and beyond, because the book is just about that first case. It's not about what happened afterwards. It's not about what led up to Jeffrey Epstein's death. It's none of that. It has maybe one chapter that's written after the fact for the second edition, but the Netflix docuseries really goes in a lot deeper, and you are hearing from the victims themselves. And I don't want to call them victims, but I'm going to call them victims because they were children. Yeah. So I'm fascinated by this whole case because of the the level of intrigue because of all of the players on the international level, because there's mystery and there's spies and there's like Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, right? I just refer to him as Mr. Maxwell. He was probably a Mossad agent, so like an Israeli spy, and he was working for like a British broadcasting company, and he stole all the pension money, and then he was living large, and he had a boat that was named after his daughter, after one of his children, by the way. He had multiple children, keep that in mind. And then he ends up dead. Who knows? Maybe he stripped off all of his clothes and ended up drowning himself just off of his boat. Or maybe there was someone else involved. I don't quite know. That's part of the mystery. So this just came out last night, actually, is that one of the judges, so this is Newsweek magazine, and the title is Jeffrey Epstein case judge has ties to cops who want to keep records secret. Ooh, interesting. So it says here that the judge involved in the case did not disclose any potential conflicts of interest when ruling not to release grand jury records related to disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, despite having connections to those involved in the case. Seems like people can't get their nose out of this case, even when they shouldn't be part of it. I think when we're talking about overhauling all of these systems, when we're talking about injustices and whatnot across our countries, one of those things we definitely have to look at is how much power do people with money have? Are they able to buy off judges and prosecutors and people in authority figures? Maybe not buying them off with cash money necessarily, but buying them off with influence or intimidating them with their power and influence as well. So, yeah, I wonder. So I think if we're looking at overhauling these systems, we definitely need to look at our justice system and how that justice is played out, not just because of the color of one's skin. That is definitely something we need to dive deeper into. We need to look at that. But we also need to look at how class and financial access plays into our court systems as well. I know a lot of... I know a few people who have worked in the past as legal aid or like government paid legal counsel for people who can't afford their own lawyers. And they're awesome lawyers. Like these people, that is their passion, that is their heart, their soul is helping people who need help, helping them navigate the complex web of the legal system. But the way that those structures are funded lead to these lawyers holding like 20, 30, 40, 50 cases at a time. So you can't provide the quality legal counsel that everyone deserves if you're trying to also manage all of these other cases. Sometimes you'll even see these legal aid lawyers show up and they're so flustered. And it's not because they're bad lawyers. It's because they're being managed in a way that is unproductive and isn't fruitful to the end user. So if we as taxpayers are putting money into those kinds of systems, I think we should have a say in how those systems function. Maybe they worked a long time ago, but our populations keep increasing, and if we don't manage our systems to fit those like increases in numbers, then what do we plan to accomplish? Just a question. Yeah, it's one of those days. It's one of those days, guys. All right, so let's see what the next article I have is. Oh, now we're gonna get into some politics. I gotta pour myself some more tea. So where is everyone from? Let me know what's going on. I'm in Canada. It's actually not winter, which is fabulous. It's beautiful outside. I've been spending a lot of time in my hammock, a lot of time hiking, a lot of time out and about. and a ton of time working on my big special surprise, the big project I've been working on, which I will be announcing on Saturday during the live broadcast of the Lifelong podcast. So if you haven't joined me for one of those, please come join me. Yeah, all right. Here we go. Facebook. So I love social media. I think it's fantastic to see it evolve, to see our behaviors as humans evolve alongside this technology. Yeah, and seeing, especially right now, seeing how social media platforms are either politicizing themselves or trying not to politicize themselves, but by doing so, they are politicizing themselves. What they're doing in order to get certain messages out, what they're doing to amplify certain voices or to quell certain voices, I guess would be the way to say it. Yeah, interesting. So I've been a member of, I've had a Facebook account since back in the day when you needed to have a .edu email address. So cheers to all of you old people out there. Yeah, when it was really just people from like one generation, before people's parents showed up, before people's like little brothers and sisters showed up. It was pretty neat. Yeah. I've migrated around, like in the pre-Facebook days, there was a handful of smaller social media platforms. Like Facebook isn't the first one. Facebook just did it right in the way that was able to 10x their business platform. So I was on like Bolt and MySpace and Vampire Freaks and, you know, all of those kinds of little platforms. So it's interesting to see how each of those platforms evolved as their populations grew, but this was back in the day. Facebook now has pretty much a monopoly on the social media stuff in terms of like the business side of it. So it's interesting now to see how that's evolving in this day and age. So you have this like war of platforms right now. So you have Twitter and you have Facebook. So Twitter is taking an active stance at marking what is considered possible fake news, incorrect information. That's obviously enraging the US president. He's not too happy about that, but Twitter has made a stance. As a company, as a platform, they're waving their banner. So the people who believe in that are going to back them, and the people who disagree with them are going to stand opposed to them. So they're at least creating some kind of polarity, which will, yes, it will repel the people who don't believe in what they're standing for, but it will, more importantly, unite the people who stand behind that cause. So it's a great thing to do if you are a business person, is to think about that polarity in your business. So on the other side of that, you have Facebook, and Facebook initially was saying that they're taking this really stepped back approach, this let's just see how things unfold approach, which I find really curious because they are Facebook is one of the most curated, algorithm heavy platforms out there. So just by allowing your algorithm to do its work, you are in some ways silencing some voices and amplifying others. Yeah. And I don't think that there's enough platform users out there who know how to work the algorithm in order to amplify the voices that need to be amplified. I play with the algorithm a lot. So Facebook owns Instagram. So here's a great example. Someone posts a picture. They need to get a certain level of engagement on that post within the first hour of that post going up, for the algorithm to pick that up and amplify it. So that means likes, comments, and shares. So if you like, comment, and share on posts that you are like, yeah, I think this needs to be said, then you're going to add to that algorithm. But on the other side of that, you have people who are just getting offended. And they're like, well, you shouldn't be commenting on this, or you shouldn't be, why are you sharing this? You don't fit into this group that we're trying to talk about, or whatnot. Um, and yeah, like totally engage in the comments and add to that, have those conversations to not only share the information and share the process and how this tactic can work, but also you're adding to the algorithm by doing that. So yeah, I'm not trying to get people upset. I'm just trying to amplify using the algorithm, okay, people? Anyways, that's my tangent for the day. But yeah, so Facebook is now started labeling certain media sources as being state controlled. And that's a big. I've always been fascinated by this. So clearly, there are countries out there that the governments have direct control of media sources. So that is entirely what I would consider state-run media. It's government funded, and it's the editorial content is directed by a government agency. Okay. A lot of people are saying that the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is state-run media here in Canada. It's not. I hate to break it to you, but they are not government funded. They do receive CBC and like the provincial media sites, like here in Ontario, it's TV Ontario. They're given government grants in order to cover a certain amount of Canadian content, or to provide educational content, or to provide, like if the government actually needs their platform to share something. For example, in our provincial TVO has strong ties to the government of Ontario because technically they are state-run. They're closer to state-run. They do have strong partnerships within the government, and that allows the government to use TVO as a platform. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing at all. It's been used mostly in my life as a platform for education. So back when I was in high school, before there was this current increase of online courses, I did a lot of independent learning, and those were done with booklets where they'd mail you a package of booklets, you'd work through them, and then you'd mail them back with your projects and things like that. And that was done through a partnership between the government, TVO, and the Independent Learning Center. So So now with lockdown, TVO has been providing fantastic educational content for elementary school students that's based on the Ontario curriculum. So there is that partnership happening, and we're able to get a cohesive message out there that has action behind it. So I think that's fantastic. But the CBC is not state-run media. The CBC has its own board of directors, it has its own editorial content, it has its own news content, etc. But it does work in collaboration with government agencies in order to set out messages, to fulfill Canadian content, and to working collaboratively within your organizations is really important. But I'm going off on a tangent because I just wanted to make the point that they're not state-run media. But Facebook, instead of stating that certain things are not fact-based, so instead of fact-checking things, they're really just giving you more information of who's funding this source. Pros and cons behind that? Yeah, of course. So it's great. The more information you have about your sources, the better. It helps you make an informed decision. Understanding where the money is coming from is one of the best ways to understand where bias sits in that reporting. There's going to be bias everywhere. Even the most unbiased reporters are going to sprinkle in some kind of bias just based on the perspective in which they're seeing the situation. When you follow the money, though, that's where things get nice and complicated, just where I like to be. So I think this is going to be fantastic. I think this is going to go in the right direction. I'm hopeful, of course. We also need to check what is being deemed a government source and what isn't. So there may not be a money trail between, say, the president and Fox News, but is there an influence trail? Is there a trail that takes a couple steps? Like if we go back to the Epstein case, we can see that there is this web, this complex web that ties modeling agencies, like model recruiters and modeling agencies, to the abuse on Epstein's private island, for example. Like there are steps, there are players involved, there's a whole system and a pattern that has to be followed. Is that happening as well in media sources? And also, I love the fact that there are so many more independent journalists out there who are just reporting from their laptops as well and getting the message out. And I think that's fantastic. The more people who are sharing their messages, the better. But we also then, when you don't have like a editorial board above you or an editor, you may end up pushing your bias a little bit more. You may end up going down an interesting road and might not be chasing down the appropriate facts. But, get the message out there. But I think instead of policing the sources, I think what's most important is that we educate readers so that those of you who are consuming this information, those of you who are reading the media, etc., are able to understand what bias is, what does it look like, where does it live, and how do you track it down. The more informed you are as a public, the faster we can move forward, the better we can move forward. Like, we can actually accomplish great things when we're able to clear out what is fact, what isn't, what is useful information, what is bias, what is perspective, and understand empathy and be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes to say, all right, this is important to this group of people because X, Y, and Z. This is important to this group of people because of A, B, and C. Now, how can we find that common ground, and how can we uncover the underlying values where everyone can come together and we can agree on something? Because when you find those seeds, start building on those, and that's where you'll be able to build things that are great, that are lasting, and that will make a positive impact in people's lives. Woo! All right, enough about Facebook. Do we want to talk about police? I talked a lot about police this week. I did a legal observer training earlier this week. I'm going to do another one this week as well. If you're interested in participating in demonstrations, not necessarily, it's not specific to the demonstrations that are happening right now, but being a legal observer is a fantastic role that you can play in any demonstration. If you believe in democracy, if you are proud to have that as the foundation of your society, then I go out and protect it. I may not agree with what some protesters are saying in different contexts. I've been doing this for like 20 years, it feels like. I may not agree with what someone is protesting or demonstrating against or for, but I surely believe in your right to do that. I may not agree in your opinion, but I fully believe in your right to have that opinion, and I will do what it takes to protect your right to have that. I've been to way too many places where people do not have those rights, and I come back here and people find it so, like, they're so flippant about it. They think that of course we all have the right to freedom of speech. Well, in order to have that right, you need to protect that right. Just saying. Exactly. I agree with what you're saying, Alex, that not all police are bad like most media is portraying. And that's it's definitely something that I've seen in my work as a legal observer. So a legal observer goes to demonstrations. You're not an activist. You're not a lawyer. You simply are there to observe and record the actions between security forces and the demonstrators. And this is to be used in cases of like overstepping and things like that. So I'm from Toronto, in Canada, and we've been having these demonstrations. And although I haven't been able to be part of them, I have been working with a group of legal observers and working to train them so that they can participate in these demonstrations. And what's been fantastic is that the police here haven't been overstepping. many of them have been standing in solidarity on the sides saying, yes, we need reform, we need change. How can we do that? Starting that conversation. So many of our cops, even our chief of police, got down on his knee on multiple occasions in the last couple days, alongside protesters, to recognize that there is something that needs to change. There is something big that needs to change. And this has been a discussion that's been happening for years in Toronto. In my eyes, it started when a few years ago during the Pride Parade, when Black Lives Matter was the honored guest or something like that. So they were marching at the front of the parade. We were celebrating their group, and they chose to stop the parade, to sit down in the middle of the intersection and refuse to continue forward until the organizers of the parade, and it's not just a parade, like it's a month-long giant event. It's one of the biggest events in Toronto every year. And they refused to move forward until the organizers signed a document saying that the police won't be involved in coming parades, etc., etc. So that's been this ongoing discussion about policing in this city. We had a program that was, I think it was colloquially called carding, and I think they refer to it as part of the community policing program. But what it did was it gave police the right to stop and question anyone they felt like they needed to question. And the term carding, I believe, comes from the police would fill out like an incident form, like I talked to this person, this is the information I've collected on them. The police keep a copy, and then they also give a copy to the person that they were questioning. And I've seen some horrible things, like they don't even ask for the person's name. They're just like blackmail. And then if you look at the statistics of that, you're seeing that they're definitely carding, or they're speaking with more black men than they are any other group of people. So it was deemed to be racially insensitive or something like that, and not so good. So they've canceled that program. And I think because of that, they have been looking for new solutions, and they are inviting the community to come and work with them. I had the honor of working with the Toronto Police, oh goodness, maybe 2004, maybe before that, early 2000s, working on a gun violence and gangs task force as a community member. And it was an eye-opening experience. I didn't do a lot of talking, believe it or not. I did a lot of listening, a lot of connecting with community members from across the city. The city is so diverse, and just hearing these stories of what was going on, and being part of demonstrations against to keep the memory of these young people in mind. And I was looking at, like, I have these badges and these mourning shirts and things like that, and I'm looking at them and I'm doing the math and realizing these people are my age. Like, when I was a teenager, I'm like, these people are my age. And in some cases, they're like in their early 20s, and they're parents, and they have these stories of transforming their lives, yet they were shot down because they were running back home and the police a lot of cases in Toronto actually are, I think one of the big things that we can do in Toronto is to look at mental health a little bit differently. We had this really cool show. I love Canadian TV. Like, I really do. And there was this show, I totally forget what it was called, but it was a cop show. But the unit that they followed, it was a drama. The unit they followed was a specialized mental health unit. So when they get a call, the partnerships that go out are one officer who is trained in mental health stuff, as well as a mental health nurse. Those are the two people who will attend to your call. And they were able to, yes, it's a drama, but they were able to show how having empathy and understanding that not everything is a criminal act, that mental health can bring us to states that are high anxiety and high tension, and if you don't have the appropriate training, it's really hard to diffuse those situations. And I've mentioned before how I always want to celebrate cops in Toronto who are able, or cops in Canada who are able to diffuse situations without their guns, and I love that. Like I'll be honest, I believe in gun ownership. At least in Canada, because gun ownership is either you're using it for hunting or you're using it to keep bears off your property, because most of my country is the wilderness, or you use it for sport. And that's where everyone that I know who is a legal gun owner, that's what they use their guns for. It's the illegal guns that come up that cause a lot of the problems. Legal gun owners aren't the ones. Here in Canada, if you're a legal gun owner, the police can just come check on your house whenever they want. Like, they can do a background check into you at any point. You've signed those rights over to them. And so legal gun owners here are, I would say, held to a higher standard, and are really, really, really law-abiding citizens. That's for sure. But yeah, we also here in Canada don't have amendments in our constitution that give us the right to bear arms. We don't have that history. We don't have a history of being afraid of our government, of wanting to rise up or preparing for the inevitability that our government is going to, we are going to need to rise up and overthrow our government. But yeah, there are some. We can get into gun ownership and gun laws and stuff in another day. It's a great topic to talk about, but we want to make sure that you keep a level head. And I think when people are able to treat each other with respect, regardless of what hat you're wearing, regardless of what role you're playing, regardless of what authority you've been granted, I think first and foremost, we have to treat people as humans. We have to treat people with respect. So I love learning about the law in different countries, different jurisdictions. Of course, I love, as many of you know, if you've been here before, you know that I love watching the lovely soap opera of America unfold, because it's, as I describe it a lot, it is 50 different countries put together. That's really how it is. Each and every state runs completely separately, runs very differently, and there's only very few things that really are statements that you can make that speak to the whole of America, which is, I think that's fascinating. It's kind of like Europe, a whole bunch of different countries. So Alex is from the UK. He's here in the chat, and he's mentioning that they don't talk a lot about guns and whatnot in the UK because, of course, they don't have that same history as well. But one thing, Alex, I'm curious. What are your knifing statistics? Because I hear that the violent crime, at least in London, a lot of the violent crime it's not guns, it's knives, and it's much more intimate in that respect. But it's turning that same violence and that same violence, but just in a different tool. Yeah, so I'm curious. So here's this article I pulled up here from this morning. Oh, wow, from 5 a.m. this morning, saying that this is American. It's from NPR, and it says Supreme Court weighs qualified immunity for police accused of misconduct. Ooh, qualified immunity is a complex term. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm probably going to butcher this, but my understanding is that qualified immunity is a protection given to the police because of the job that they have to do. They're going to have to be a little bit tougher on the people that, like, physically tough on the people that they're arresting. So that then, by virtue of the role that they play, they are then immune from certain types of prosecution. I think that's what it is. Let's read the article and figure it out. Well, here's the article. With the country awash in protests over the death of George Floyd, the U.S. Supreme Court is examining a modern day legal doctrine created by judges that has shielded police and other government officials from lawsuits over their conduct. The doctrine is called qualified immunity. Developed in recent decades by the Supreme Court, the doctrine, as applied to police, initially asked two questions. First, did the police use excessive force? And if they did, should they have known that their conduct was illegal because it violated a clearly established prior court ruling that barred such conduct? Here is like the messed up part about this. Sounds great, right? So you're asking the police, did you overstep your authority? But then that second question really complicates it, and it gets my blood boiling. I'm sorry. If there is no, quote, clearly established court rulings ahead of time, then the police just kind of get a pass. And that's complicated because every single situation of misconduct is going to have unique circumstances. It's going to be in a different place at a different time. Something different will have started that incident. The police walk in at a different time in that incident, etc., etc. Each and every one of those moments is going to be unique. So there can't be court precedent then. There can't be exact court precedent because these situations haven't happened before. Just a thought. So that's something I think is quite... I can see the value of it from certain... You have to recognize when these rules were put into place, what the context of society was at the time. Was there a lot of police brutality? Was there a lot of people assuming or calling something police brutality that maybe wasn't? And now we needed a rule about it. But now it's clear that there is overstepping and that this law as it's written isn't good enough. It's not good enough. It doesn't have enough detail. It doesn't have enough nuance. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So stabbings in the UK, definitely. So I used to live in France, and a couple different places in France, like in Paris and in the south and in the east. And so I lived in tiny little towns where there's like 300 people in a farm town, and there's like thousands of acres of canola fields around you. I've lived in the city in Paris, where it's busy and it's full of people from all over the world. And I've also lived in the south of France, where it's a ski resort. So it was a particular type of people. I don't want to say a socioeconomic group because it wasn't. Yes, you needed to have the funds and the resources to be able to spend your vacation time there. Yes, there was also people who were they didn't really work and they were able to spend their whole days and whatnot living in the ski resort. There's locals who had a different, I met a couple guys who worked there who spent their summers as shepherds on the mountain and then their winters as ski instructors or ski patrol. So it was a nice mix, but it was an interesting intersection of people from around the world. And there's a large contingent of people from the UK, from all over the UK, who would come down and they would work for the season. And then that added a lot, I think, a lot of dimension to my experience down there, seeing what it was like for the way that certain people acted. So I'm going to tie something into this a little bit. I guess what I'm trying to say is I have to preface this. I have to frame this so you understand a little bit more, and I'm not speaking down to the people I'm talking about at all. I was in a party town. I was in a ski resort. So people were coming as tourists to party and to relax, and the employees who were there were also enjoying the fun atmosphere. So I'm not saying anything bad about that. But I will say that there was a lot of alcohol consumption, and it was a noticeable amount different between the our friends who are from the UK and our friends who are from Canada. Uh, Very different. Very different. It seemed like it was much more culturally appropriate to drink to blackout on a regular basis. It seems like that was what people did. That was the intention they set at the beginning of the night. That's how they behaved. And so it was interesting to see their behavior when they were intoxicated. I'm used to seeing people intoxicated who are like, woo, I'm just gonna say something stupid and slur my words and walk around without my shoes on and like, I want to touch your hair and like things like that. Whereas some of my friends from the UK, they got violent. They got angry. They started like purposely seeking out people who were from different towns and supported different football clubs so that they could fight each other. And like it was like their culminating moment of the night was getting in a fight. And I was like, whew, interesting. And one of my friends from Scotland, he was trying to explain this whole phenomenon. He's like, oh, that's just the boys, that's how we say hello in our part of the world. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's new to me. And so I had this sober talk with everyone one day, and I was like, okay, I'm curious. What's going on? And we got into this really interesting discussion that segued into a lot of them showing me their knife collections. So they're now living in a different country. Well, I guess it's the EU, so it's not as different as like a Canadian going into America, I guess. But talking about what they have to do to protect themselves, what they need to do to, lots of fighting. Like, oh my goodness. And at one point, total side tangent, why not? It's the 8 o'clock hour. Total side tangent, but one of my favorite things when I lived there was, so we're in France, in the south of France, and we have these beautiful mountains. And the mountain that we were at was home to the British military, the British military's ski team. So they have a ski team that's comprised of members of all different UK forces, and they'd come and they'd ski and they'd have a good time. And they were awesome. They were totally awesome. Absolute gentlemen. I have to say, absolute gentlemen. But there's definitely a different culture when it comes to drinking in the UK. Lots of drinking to excess. And keep in mind, I'm living in France at this time, and I started living in France when I was a kid, and quickly learned that it's culture, like within the culture in France, kids will start drinking at like age 8, but not drinking to get drunk. You have wine at the table. It's part of dinner. It's part of the culture, so it's not necessarily trying to. It's not drinking to get drunk. It's just drinking as part of food and drink, I guess, is the difference that I was noting when I was a kid. Good morning, Michael. And so now I look back at these experiences and I realize that my French friends were, yes, they were drinking a lot. Like we would go, oh man, we'd have like bottles of wine. So I lived in the mountains, right? So we'd have like bottles of wine in our bag, but no corkscrew. The French guys would always do this. And they're like, oh, how are we going to open the bottle of wine without a corkscrew? Well, all you need is a shoe and a hard surface. That's what I'm going to say. You put the shoe on the bottle of the wine, and then you bang to protect the bottle, and then you bang the bottom of the shoe against a rock or a wall or something like that, forcefully but gently at the same time, and it'll push the cork out. So it was... Drinking became something that was romantic. It was something to be sipped. It was something to be enjoyed. But then I was around these people who were blackout drunk every single night. And it was a different world. I have to say, it was a different world. Um, but drinking and driving is another thing. Let's dive into that one. Um, so in France, I have zero tolerance for drinking and driving. I'll tell you that. Why? Well, when I was in high school, I had, well, grade school, high school, we're a really small community, so everyone was kind of friends with each other. And I was friends with this one young guy. He was a year older than me. And he was a bit of a party kid. He was a bit of he had a good time. He had a lot of friends. He was quite social. And he and I became really close in when I was in 10th grade. He was in 11th grade. We were in 10th grade math class together. He was my seat buddy. And the way the teacher ran the class was we go through our assignment, and then we switch papers with our seat buddy, and we kind of help each other out before we ask the TA or the teacher for help. So I got to spend a lot of time chatting with this guy and watching his life evolved over that semester. And he went from being this guy who was known for being a partier and a drinker and all that, and he totally sobered up. He cleaned up his life. He got a job, and he was really changing his direction in life. And I was so proud of him. Like, it was really awesome to see someone take charge of their life and figure out what direction they wanted to go in. Oh, Blank Mountain, you're adorable. I don't know. Tell me more about yourself. Then we can get chatting. So my buddy goes to a party. I think it was like an end of year party. I'm so bad with dates. Long story short, he went to this party. Everyone was absolutely plastered. He showed up absolutely sober and left early. And why did he leave early? He left early because he had to get up and go to work the next morning, which is something that not many of us were doing at that time. And, well, he got hit by a drunk driver. And he died instantly on the scene. Instantly. And the drunk driver survived. The drunk driver's still alive. Just saying. Yeah. So I have like a zero tolerance policy for that. Like, yeah, no. Yeah, it's same here same here, Alex. There's levels of, you can have a blood alcohol at certain levels. And you can still drive. But I think I'm really old, so this doesn't apply to me, but I think if you're under 21, the drinking age in here is 19. The province next to me, it's 18. But I think if you're under 21, then you have to, you can have zero blood alcohol level, I think. I don't know. There's big restrictions. So you're a DJ. What kind of a DJ are you? That's what I need to know. I'm very particular about my music tastes. So yeah. Yeah, I hope that driver lives with that for the rest of their life. Yeah, you still see this guy's name, like my friend who passed away, you still see his name over everywhere. So that's pretty awesome. So his memory will live on. But I mention this because when I was living in France, this blew my mind. So by law, the police have to tell you when there's a speed trap, or when there's police like waiting on the road for you. So unfortunately, it seemed like everyone was okay with drinking and driving where I was. Maybe it's because they were in the middle of nowhere. In my opinion, that's more of a reason not to drink and drive. You're in the mountains, you're on winding roads, up mountain cliffs. Like, driving there during the day was scary. I couldn't imagine driving drunk at night and speeding, but that's what they did. Okay, dance music is quite a broad category. What kind of dance music? Let's be specific here. I say this because I am a huge, like, funky house, like, tech house, like, big bop, like, that kind of music is what I'm into. No glitchy, none of that stuff. Like, no. Give me Chicago, give me deep house, give me funky house. That's what I'm looking for. Side tangent. So in France, they have to tell you when there's going to be a speed trap. So I worked at all these different bars, and sometimes I'd walk home, and it was maybe like 10 kilometers home, and that was cool. So I'd sit outside the bar and just watch what was happening, because you'd have this long stretch. I guess I should explain one thing. Ski resort was 4 towns long, okay? So I live in town 1, and I work in town 2. And there's this giant space in between town 1 and town 2 that's just, like, there's no street lights, nothing. It's long, winding road. Takes about 10 minutes on the bus to get from one populated area to the next. So in that stretch, that's where people would just totally zip by. Then they'd see the sign that says, oh, police waiting. And then they'd slow right on down, past the police, pretty much wave to the police, and then speed up again. And that really wasn't cool. And a few years ago, actually, an entire family was killed here, near where I live here in Canada. And it was devastating. Absolutely devastating. So it was... who ended up dying were the 3 young children. I think there was 2 or 3 young children. All 3 of them died, and their grandfather died. So this mother lost her children and her father. Why? Because this rich guy who... It's a small community. He came back from a bachelor's party in Vegas on his private plane, landed at the Toronto airport, was so flipping intoxicated, he jumps into his SUV and speeds up. So let me give you an idea of what this looks like. So from the airport, about halfway through his drive is packed with traffic. It's busy roads, it's highways, it's... here we call them 400 series highways, so they're big, wide, massive speed highways. So he zips through those, and then you end up in the country, where it's 80 kilometers an hour is the speed limit on sometimes dirt roads, 1 lane in each direction, stoplights maybe 3 to 5 kilometers apart, and then lots of side roads coming in that are stop signs. Okay, so it's the country. There aren't straight intersections very often because it's farmland, so everything's staggered. And this guy just zips forward. I don't even know what speed he was going, but he was going really flippin' fast. And he just T-boned these guys and killed them instantly. So yeah, guys, don't go drinking and driving. It leads to a lot of problems. Just chill. Don't be so intoxicated, I guess. Maybe figure out why you have the need to get so intoxicated, and let's chat it out. Let's figure it out. Actually, Blank Mountain, you're inspiring me to talk about something. I'm curious about all your thoughts on this, guys. So there's I don't know if it's still a thing, but back like maybe 5-10 years ago, there was this new thing that was about sober raves, like morning raves, and people going to these like dance parties and stuff where there's absolutely no alcohol, no drugs, nothing, and people are just experiencing the high of dancing. I'm interested. Well, Blank Mountain, you got to tell me a little bit more before I'm going to commit myself to being your online girlfriend. I'm curious. What are your dreams, goals, and ambitions in life? I need to know your dreams, goals, and ambitions. Yep. Welcome to the Monday morning dating show. Apparently. Whatever. I'm down for a party. Yeah, so let's see if there's other... there's this other article from NPR that is about... the caption, or the headline is, "In a polarized election, Guardian women could be key swing voters." So they've identified a new voting block of important women that they're going to start targeting. And I'm interested in this. So it says the COVID-19 crisis has brought significant challenges for American women, increasing their burden of care and raising unemployment levels to greater numbers compared to men. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Oh, you want to be famous? Okay. In your search for fame, Blank Mountain, what kind of value are you going to provide to the world? What is it that you're going to give to the world in exchange for those followers and that fame? What kind of value? What are you going to contribute to the world in order to get that fame? That's an important question to me. So back to this article. As the general election inches closer, this is of course in America, new polling shows that a subset of American women remain a wild card. So there's important swing voters. And they could be a crucial swing vote if the race for president gets close. Interesting. The nonpartisan group called All In Together took a look at how the pandemic was affecting women's political views and their willingness to vote in November. They surveyed 1,000 women and found over a quarter of them were swing voters. All right, so 1,000 people in a survey is the absolute minimum you should have if you're going to consider these statistics to be of any value. So, hold on. I got to get back to the dating show here. All right, so Blank Mountain, you want to work hard. Well, that's good. That's the vehicle that you're going to use to create that fame, to provide that value. But what is it? Are you going to be a producer? Are you going to create awesome music for the world? Or are you going to create the most awesome sets at the clubs and keep people going all night? Are you going to stretch and use different platforms in new and innovative ways and get fame because of that? Are you going to be a mentor for younger people in the industry who are looking to get started, who are looking to break into being a DJ? I used to be a DJ. Those were the days. Oh man. So I was in Ibiza. Nice. Good choice. Good one, Alex. So oh man, I used to be a DJ way back in the day, and I was I was so mean. I was very old school, and there was a bit of a war going on. I use that very loosely. Or a bit of a rivalry between the two main cliques, and DJ cliques down here. And so there was there was my group, which was the Vinyl Puritans. We only spun vinyl. If you spun anything other than vinyl, we would leave. And then there was those who were spinning on CDJs, and then eventually it moved to people spinning on like Serato and using their computers, and just MP3s. And it's like, oh my goodness, there's all these different worlds. But yeah, I would be the girl that would be underage hauling like record crates to the club to spin for half an hour or an hour, and that was what I did. That was, yeah, it's not so fun to haul records around, to haul vinyl around for like 3 days at a time in the heat of the summer. It sucks when you end up at the club and your records are all melted. Yeah. But I had some pretty fantastic records back in the day. I gave a lot of them away actually to a friend of mine who was DJing at the time. When I finally realized that vinyl was too expensive, I ended up giving away not only my turntables, but all of my vinyl. But they went to great homes, so I'm happy about that. I'm really happy about that. Yeah, those were the days. I wouldn't say it's necessarily more skill necessarily. I felt that spinning on vinyl was easier for me, because of the tactile nature of it, where you could see I don't know, there was something about just physically touching, holding that record, seeing how fast it was spinning, that kind of thing that helped me. Like, DJing isn't hard, let's be honest. Like, the baseline skill that you need is beat matching, and that's it. above and beyond that, that's flair. That's adding, starting to get into the world of producing and really adding to the music. You're not just putting tracks back to back to back and making sure you don't have a train wreck. I was known for some really good train wrecks back in the day. But I will say there's some fantastic energy in the world of in the DJing world as well. There's some horrible energy. There are people who totally take advantage of the situation, who thrive in an environment where there are young, beautiful women who are totally intoxicated and they enjoy taking advantage of them. There's that. I've seen a lot of that in my life. But I really, I was part of a community of people who were absolutely amazing. We had, back in the day, we had more record stores than I can count down in the city, and every store was different and had its own community as part of it, and they were inclusive environments. They were places where I'd go to this one record store, To the Beat. It's not there anymore, but oh man, that was a life-changing place. Like, so much of my young years were spent at that store. And there's some amazing DJs down there. And you know what? I honestly don't know who worked there and who was just hanging out there. But there was this one moment that I will remember for the rest of my life. So I'm going to admit something to you guys. I was a candy kid. I was a happy hardcore raver. Lots of colors, that kind of kid. But I didn't connect with that. That was just what my friends were doing. So I end up at the store, and I'm looking specifically for Scott Brown records, so happy hardcore records. I'm listening to them, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this one's good. Oh, yeah, that'll get the party going. Yeah, okay. And then I pull out a couple of house records, and I'm listening to those, and I'm like, my expression is completely changing. And one of my favorite DJs at the time, he comes on over. Actually, two of them, Red Turtle and Justin Tice. And they came over and they're like, girl, you need those records. Why are you putting those ones away? The ones that were getting me super pumped, and I was so excited about them, and I was playing them over and over. I'm singing them out loud. They're like, why are you putting those records away? Well, I'm putting them away because they're house music, and house music is hard to spin. And I should just stick with the happy hardcore because it's so fast and it's so loud, and hardcore music in general, and it's so fast, it's so loud that it's really easy to transition from song to song. And they were like, you got to stop doing that. You got to stop doing that, because the whole point of being a musician and being involved in music and creativity in general is being able to express yourself and being able to share your emotions with people. And if you're not connected to the music that you're playing, then how do you expect your community to connect in that way? And I was like, whoa, that's so cool. So I started playing music that actually inspired me, that was exciting and got me excited to dance. And yeah. And then, of course, those of you who have been following me for a while, I've mentioned my friend Ryan before. So he was one of the main producers and DJs with the Sub Assassins, which was a group of awesome DJs that I guess they were from all over the States, but they started out in Chicago, and then a couple of them moved down to Phoenix. But Ryan passed away a few years ago. Sub Assassins isn't really a thing now, but I mentioned them because Ryan and I met on the afterhoursdjs.org forums, because he would spin a 6-hour set every Sunday. My buddy Elusive would spin for an hour Sunday at noon or something, and then Ryan and the guys would jump on at 1 or 2 o'clock and spin all day. And I would just hang out in the chat and pump that music so loud. It was fantastic. And they were spinning on CDJs and Serato, and it took years for me to be okay with that, to get off my frickin' high horse and be music is music, get over it. So that's my story about that. Let's get back to voters. Oh man, you guys are fun. So, so we're looking at 1,000 women, and 26% of them were swing voters, which means they haven't decided if they're voting for either party. Because remember, in the States, They pretty much have a two-party system. That's it. Those are your options. You either like this guy or that guy. And if you choose to vote any other way, it throws off the balance and who knows. And then we're not getting into the complications of like the electoral college and stuff like that. That we can get into later because that's going to get really complicated and really, I think we're going to add a lot to this coming up this year. Or this week, sorry. Because I'm just going to touch on this super briefly. There are certain Republican delegates. Yeah, Republican delegates. So people who, electoral college system says, I as a citizen, I'm not an American, but I as a citizen place my vote. That vote gets grouped together with the other people in my area or my state, and then my state picks representatives who are then going to vote on my behalf. So even though the general election is in November, the delegates who are actually casting those ballots in December. So it's in December that the president is actually chosen. And I'm interested this year because I wonder if there's going to be a disconnect. In 2016, we saw a disconnect between the popular vote and the electoral college vote. I expect that we're going to see that again. It's complicated this year because there are certain Republican delegates who have already stated that they're probably not going to vote for Trump, or they may actually vote. Here in Canada, we call it crossing the floor. They'd be voting for the opposite party. So I'm interested. I'm interested in that. But we'll talk about that next week for sure. So let's get back to these lady swing voters. So it says, quote, there is again a group of women that are on the fence. They have split their vote over the years, have gone back and forth between voting Democrat and Republican, said the CEO of this organization. The group is referring to them as guardian women, defined as largely white, married, and over 50 years old. So if you're over 50 years old, you were born in the 60s. So you're the post-hippie kind of group of people. So you've seen the world change. You aren't impacted by, you're kind of the wave. So this is the wave after the baby boom, that the tail end of the baby boomers who were born, the late 40s into the very early 50s. So this is 10 years after that. The majority also live in suburban areas and have an income over $50,000 and do not have a college degree. That's interesting. So we're talking about possibly housewives. I don't know if when they say an income over $50,000, they mean a personal income over $50,000 or a household income divided between partners. So a 50-year-old woman who is married to someone who's bringing in like $100,000 a year, kind of thing. Well, Blank Mountain, are you able to bring in over $100,000 a year so that I can be a white suburban lady with a personal income of $50,000 a year at all? Although I have too many college degrees, so I can't be, I don't necessarily fit into this. I'm really curious about this whole not having a college degree thing. Because women of that generation are the driving force. When you look at statistics of numbers of women enrolled in college programs and how they break down by age categories and stuff like that, it's that age group that was leading that force of women in school. So I'm interested, I'm curious. Let's keep reading. Leader companies, these women... No, sorry, I can't read. So the survey compares these women to soccer moms and security moms observed in the past campaign years. Okay, we've talked about those before. Republicans really jumped on the soccer moms, really campaigned a lot specifically to soccer moms in previous campaigns. They became a bit of a battleground as well, because in many cases they are, at least in my household, I know my mom definitely decided who my father was voting for. Definitely. So maybe that's what we're talking about when we're talking about this group of women. So it also says here that there have always been groups of women who are really split down the middle in terms of their political affiliation. Obviously. In 2012, these voters were divided almost evenly between Obama at 40% and Mitt Romney at 42%. Really? I wonder if that was before or after the binders full of women comment. I don't know. Alex, I think the article is focusing on women because they are a demographic that is going to vote. So when it comes to elections, yeah, it would be nice to have a campaign that's just like, okay, we as people believe X, Y, and Z, but what is important to people is different based on their sex, based on their roles, based on their place in society, based on their income, based on their socioeconomic status, based on their education status, based on their family status, etc., etc., etc. So when it comes to making, when it comes to effectively speaking to micro groups, you have to be able to break it down into those kind of demographics. So I think the article is simply just focusing on this organization's this poll that's come out, etc. So yeah. So in 2016, this group was also split between Hillary Clinton at 43% and President Trump at 41%. Interesting. Interesting. This new poll indicates that former Vice President Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee, oh, we can get into that too. Not this week, though. That'll be later on down the road as we approach closer to the Democratic convention, because he is the presumptive nominee. He is not the official nominee. So things could get exciting. I'm still holding off for some of my favorite people to maybe get back in the race, or at least get back into the discussions. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not American. Well, Biden may have a slight edge with this group for now. A significant portion, which is they call 12%, said that they are undecided. When pushed, the undecided voters will lean towards Trump, giving the president a potential chance to win back the advantage among them. Interesting. All right, so if you're interested, you can read through that article yourself. It's, again, from npr.org. All right, and the very last topic that we're going to talk about today is coming out of New York City. Again, it's off of NPR. I love NPR's articles. They give a great variety of topics. Yeah. So Mayor Bill de Blasio, he came out, he's the mayor of New York City. He came out in a press conference yesterday talking about his city. And one thing that not only the New York police, or not only New York City officials have decided, but other cities and municipalities around North America have opened up this discussion about defunding the police and instead moving that money to communities. Like as a broad brush statement, interesting. Lots of stuff to get into here. So we have on one side, we have the over militarization of our police. We have we have organizations and governments that are spending so much money on militarizing our police. So in Canada, it's different than in the States. So in the States, they have a program, I forget what it's called, but where surplus military supplies are able to trickle down into police departments. And there's application processes and grants and all that kind of stuff. In Canada, it's a little bit differently. They apply directly for the funding. And there isn't as close of a connection between defense. So, yeah, not saying that we don't have riot cops, and we have cops on horseback, we have cops with riot gear, we have SWAT teams, we have armored vehicles, we have all of that stuff here too. We definitely don't see it to the same degree as we do in the States, and that's just because of the way the access programs that they have there. So there is a lot more surplus in the States that trickles down, and that's why you're seeing a lot more a lot more. Also, in the States, they also are able to connect so many different law enforcement agencies together. So we're seeing at these demonstrations, we're seeing pretty much an alphabet soup of federal agencies, municipal agencies, state agencies that are patrolling and enforcing during these times. So, so we see that there is something that in my opinion, is stepping a little bit further away from policing and moving more towards a military kind of thing going on. So, so these municipalities, including New York City, are looking at either removing or reducing the funding to their policing agencies and focusing more on community organizations. And here in Toronto, our mayor came out and said that one of the areas that our city is really going to focus on in order to help solve these complex problems is they're going to instead start putting more money into community-based organizations and specifically into job opportunities for young people. Oh, we talked earlier this episode about the complications of government currently paying. In Canada, it's called the CERB. Governments are paying for people to stay home. Hello. Welcome from Periscope. So we have that complication, but that isn't something that's going to last forever. I think that's just a situation we're dealing with this year. But what is going to be a conversation that will last a long time is when we talk about when we talk about access to opportunity. So in a lot of our cities, we don't have the same kinds of opportunities for young people to try new things, to grow as young people, to become productive members of our society. I know I've spent a lot of time working in like recreation and camps, which are predominantly staffed by young people, and they're such, in my opinion, working at a summer camp is one of the best ways to grow as a leader, to grow your skills, to develop as a person, and to figure out what your strengths and what your gifts are for the world. It also teaches you a lot about patience. It teaches you about working in a team. It teaches you about being accountable. It teaches you about being held to a higher standard and to give back to your community. So when we don't have summer camps running, we obviously don't have those programs available for young people to work in. But I also think that we well, I'm a taxpayer, so I think that it's my duty to contribute to the work that my government is putting forward. I believe that I have a say, and I need to be part of that. So I totally support this idea of increasing job opportunities, volunteer opportunities, et cetera, for young people. I used to work for the school board, and I was part of a really awesome program that, an initiative that helped to redefine what the graduation standards were for, this is when I worked for the ministry, so for the province. They redefined what the graduation requirements were for young people graduating from high school. We identified that there was definitely an unnecessarily high dropout rate. And we were asking these people who were either at risk of dropping out or who had recently dropped out. And we were diving deeper into why. What was motivating them to take that action? Was it because they were being bullied in school and they were being pushed out? Or was it because that they had needs outside of the school that the school system wasn't able to meet? In many cases, that's what was happening. These young people needed to leave school so that they could get a job, so that they could support their families. So what we did was we were able to change those graduation requirements. So at the time, you needed to have, there's all these different categories you need to get courses and all those. And there's these 3 categories at the bottom where you needed a senior science, a senior business, and a senior math or something like that. But they were very much, the way that it was written, the way that it was designed, it was quite quite focused towards people going on to higher education, to university. Their senior science classes are always university level at that point. So instead, what we did was we added to each of those categories a co-op. So you could fulfill each of those 3 categories by doing a co-op placement. And this way we were able to meet the needs of our students who are looking at going into apprenticeships or going into the trades. And they could actually start that training before they left high school. So when they did finish, when they did graduate, not only did they have a high school graduation certificate, but they also had an extra seal, an extra thumbs up on their certificate saying that they had focused their attention on this trade or on this specific technology route, for example. And that way, when they left high school, they were ready and they were equipped to get straight into apprenticeships, to start earning money, and to start living a successful and productive life. And that, I think, was the most impactful thing that I've ever been part of. So I fully support when we're looking at ways of changing how we're doing things right now and looking for productive ways to better meet the needs of everyone. Because when more people are free to express themselves, to be themselves, to not feel held down by authorities and whatnot, and rather to feel lifted by their communities, then we can actually start addressing these complex problems head on together and create better solutions moving forward. So that's the big stuff I wanted to talk about today. On top of that, I also, I just want to give you guys a heads up that I have a lot going on this week. So if you want to join me, feel free to. 11 a.m. Eastern on Wednesdays, I will be here doing a live training. So this week we're doing the Productive Entrepreneur. So if you're curious about learning how to be more productive, get more stuff done, make bigger impact, that's the course you definitely want to check out. It's usually for sale in my membership area, but for now, I'm going to offer it to you guys for free if you choose to join me. I'm also going to be back here on Friday for the Business Building Book Club. Make sure that you get your free copy of .com Secrets at the link in the description box and follow along. Yeah, that's right. Free copy, hardcover book. Oh my God, best book when it comes to building your business online. And we're going to go through it page by page by page. I'm going to read it to you with my beautiful reading voice, and we'll chat about it, and we'll start building some awesome businesses, because there's a lot of money to make online, and I can show you how. And also later on this week, I'm also going to jump in and do another Legal Observer training. So make sure that you are subscribed on all of our platforms so that you get notified when that training does go live. I don't have a date or time set for it. I'm still in the works with the organization that is going to be live streaming it to their people, but I also have approval that I can live stream it out to all of you guys as well. So feel free to join us for that awesome training. And then, so that's talked about Wednesday. I talked about the Who Knows When legal training. I talked about the Friday book club. And of course, Saturdays, 11 a.m. Eastern is the live episode of the Lifelong podcast. So we're going to be diving into that as well. And as I have been saying for the last month and a half, the big news is going to be announced on Saturday. The big news, the big project, the secret undercover thing that I've been working on for the last few months is going to finally be announced on Saturday at our next Lifelong podcast episode. Other than that, my friends, I got a lot of work to do today, so I'm going to sign off very, very soon. But if you're in the chat, say hi, say goodbye, say I love you, say goodnight, and make sure that you guys are taking some time this week to focus on doing things that are beneficial to your community, whatever that looks like. If your community is your family or your roommate or the people on your street, or if your community is the town that you live in, the city that you live in, or the country that you live in, how are you contributing in a positive fashion to the people around you? You should be asking yourself that every day. But let's just start off by asking yourself that at the beginning of the week. So it's Monday, everyone. Set your intention for the week. Make sure that you're doing something to be positive, to contribute, and to make the world a little bit of a better place. Doesn't matter what side of the political fence you sit on. It doesn't matter how much resources you have, how much power, how much influence you have. Each and every one of us has the ability to make this world a better place. And the only way to do that is by actually taking action. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute blast. I love you all from the bottom of my heart. And until next time, everyone, remember, I love you, and be excellent to each other.